everyone, my name is Kelsey Harrington. I play volleyball at Stephen F. Austin, and I'm going to be reading you guys Chapter 2 called Eat Those Peas of the book Dog Days that you guys are reading. Uncle Vester and Aunt Myrtle come to Sunday dinner once a month. Aunt Myrtle is really Gavin's dad's aunt, so she's Gavin's great-aunt. But everyone just calls her Aunt Myrtle. It's no fun when they come to visit because Gavin has to become a completely different person. He has to say, yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, and no sir. He has to remember to eat with extra good table manners. Throughout dinner, he has to listen to Aunt Myrtle's long list of complaints and put up with the sharp looks that she gives him when she's checking to see if he's eating with extra good table manners. And when Uncle Vester drops the usual quarter in his hand, which isn't even enough to buy a candy bar, he has to look really excited and say, thank you, Uncle Vester. At least they've left Carlotta at home today. Carlotta is Aunt Myrtle's Pomeranian. She's a horrible dog with a fierce little wolf face, strange orange fur, and a way of making this low, growly sound from the back of her throat. She doesn't like Gavin, and Gavin doesn't like her. She's too nervous. She yaps all the time and runs around Gavin's ankles, threatening to nip at them. He doesn't know why she acts that way around him. Maybe he gives off a funny scent. Now Aunt Myrtle is complaining about a pain in her hip. Uncle Vester is silently chewing his mashed potatoes, looking as if he's heard this complaint 5 million times. Aunt Myrtle thinks she might have to have hip replacement surgery like her friend Gert. She goes on to explain how the surgery didn't work and how Gert is still having hip problems, and that it would be just her luck to still have the same difficulties too. Then she goes on to talk about her heartburn troubles and how she has to sit up in bed all night just to get sleep. And then, of course, there's talk of Carlotta. Gavin thinks of that little yapping mouth and how Carlotta's small head jerks a bit with each bark. He imagines sharp nibbling at his ankles. It almost makes him put his chicken leg down. I don't know what I'm going to do when Vester goes on his next trip to the barbershop harmonizers convention. When he comes home for lunch, he always walks her. Uncle Vester not only owns a barbershop on Marin Street, but he's also part of a singing group made up of real barbers. They sing for weddings and parties and stuff. Gavin has seen their act a bunch of times. He thinks about the crooners now. That's what they're called, the barbershop crooners. Just then, Gavin feels Aunt Myrtle staring at him again. Her eyes are squinted and her mouth is turned down in a disapproving way. Slowly, Gavin puts down the chicken bone he was happily gnawing on. He wipes his hands on the napkin he has in his lap, picks up his knife and fork, and attempts to cut the chicken off the bone. Chicken just doesn't taste as good this way, but Aunt Myrtle is a firm believer in not eating with one's hands if it can be helped, even though his mom doesn't mind it if it's a drumstick. Gavin sighs and moves on to the peas that he's been avoiding. They usually give him a gagging feeling. He stabs one pea with his fork and puts it in his mouth. The nastiness is almost more than he can bear. He takes a deep breath. He doesn't dare gag in front of Aunt Myrtle. He puts another pea in his mouth, noting that Aunt Myrtle has continued to peer at him over her glasses. Why are you eating your food like that, one pea at a time? Before Gavin can think of an answer, Danielle says, he always eats his pea like that, Aunt Myrtle. He doesn't like peas. I didn't ask you, Aunt Myrtle says, turning to Danielle. I asked Gavin here. Gavin almost smiles, but he holds it back. I can get them down better this way. Well, that's just nonsense. Eat those peas. I want to see you take a forkful and eat them down, right now. Gavin feels his face grow warm. He holds his breath and swallows hard. There's no way he can take a whole forkful of peas, put them in his mouth, chew, and then swallow. That's just impossible. He usually eats a pea or two at a time. Sometimes he can manage to eat half a forkful if he takes a quick gulp of milk to get it down. He begins to click his teeth, which is what he does when he gets nervous, like when a scary scene in a movie is just about to get scarier. I'm waiting, Aunt Myrtle says. His mom and dad exchange looks, but he can't tell if they're about to jump in or not. They seem to be waiting as well. Danielle, on the other hand, has a sly smile on her lips. She watches him with one eyebrow raised. She even stops eating, as if to focus all her attention on his misery. Gavin scoops up a few peas with his fork. That's not a forkful, Aunt Myrtle says. Gavin looks over at his mother. He can't read her face. He can't tell if she approves or disapproves of what Aunt Myrtle is making him do. His father, however, is going about eating his dinner. Gavin scoops up a full forkful. He looks at it as if the peas are his personal enemy. Slowly, he places the fork in his mouth. He feels a gag starting up at the back of his throat. Totally out of his control, he feels a lurch in his stomach. His eyes grow big with alarm. Quickly, he grabs his glass of milk and takes a huge swig, and then another. The peas go down. He breathes a big sigh of relief and looks over at Aunt Myrtle. The corners of her mouth have sunk down even further. "I think you've spoiled this boy, Lisa," she says to his mom. It always sounds strange when someone calls his mother by her first name. He thinks of his parents' names, Lisa and Greg, like they're regular people and not his and Danielle's mom and dad. "Yes, I think this boy's been allowed to get away with things." "Like what, Aunt Myrtle?" his mother asked with a strange tone in her voice. "Why, look what he allowed that little friend of his to do to Danielle's prized souvenir." Now Danielle really perks up. She'd met Aunt Myrtle at the door with her dumb tale of woe about that stupid snow globe. She even squeezed out a few tears. She knows she's Aunt Myrtle's favorite. Kiss up, Gavin thinks. "Why, I think Gavin here should pay his sister what that thing cost." "We were considering that," Gavin's mom says. Danielle shifts in her seat. She can hardly contain herself. "When I move in next week, I'll let him walk Carlotta. It'll be his little job, to learn the value of $1. She sits back in her chair, pleased with her plan. "Yes, I need someone to walk Carlotta, and he needs to earn the money to replace that snow globe. We'll give him $2 a day, which is really too much to walk a dog, but comes out of the goodness of my heart." Several things make Gavin's brows sink. Move in, and the little job, and $2 measly dollars. What's all this about Aunt Myrtle moving in? And walking Carlotta, that means that snarling dog of hers is going to be his job for just $2 a day? Well, it's better than a quarter a day, he supposes. As if she's heard some of his unspoken questions, Gavin's mom turns to Danielle and Gavin and says, "Aunt Myrtle is going to stay with us for a week or so while Uncle Vester goes to his Barbershop Harmonizers convention in Kansas City." Gavin looks over at Uncle Vester, who is now smiling with a faraway expression on his face. He looks like a man who's getting ready to make a great escape. "So," his mother continues, "since Auntie doesn't like to stay in their big house all alone, I thought it might be nice if she stayed here." Mom smiles brightly at each of them. Danielle cocks her head and smiles back. Gavin stares down at his hands. "Isn't this good news?" his mother prods. "Aren't we going to be happy to have her? Especially you, Gavin. Now you're going to have this nice little way to earn money and show responsibility." "I don't know if my snow globe can actually be replaced," Danielle says, just to complicate things. Gavin suspects. "Well," Aunt Myrtle says, "he'll be able to give you its value." She turns back to Gavin. "Now let's eat those peas." Why did he think Aunt Myrtle would forget about the peas? Why did he think that somehow he could get out of finishing them off? Once again, he must struggle with another forkful with all eyes on him. He holds his breath and manages to get it down by thinking of the peach cobbler his mother made for dessert. Mind over matter. As soon as his audience has moved their attention away from him and onto their own concerns, he manages to deposit the next forkful into the napkin on his lap. He looks up just as Aunt Myrtle is mentioning Carlotta's accommodations. His mom doesn't like dogs in the house, and that's going to be a problem. "We have a nice little shed off the garage, Aunt Myrtle," she says now. Aunt Myrtle's mouth presses into a disapproving line, and she looks to Gavin's dad. In a quiet voice she says, "Carlotta is not an outside dog. The shock would probably kill her." Gavin drops his head down to hide the smile he's trying very hard not to show. Aunt Myrtle goes on. "The only time she's ever outside is when Vester here walks her." Gavin's mom is quiet. Aunt Myrtle looks again to Gavin's father, as if she's addressing only him. This seems to force his dad to take a stand. "I think we can keep Carlotta on the back porch behind a child's gate. We still have the one we used when Gavin was little in the garage." Gavin's mom doesn't say anything. She takes a bite of mashed potatoes. Aunt Myrtle smiles as if she's just won a boxing match round. When the last of his peas have either been washed down with milk or slipped into his napkin, which he plans to stuff into his pocket and discard in the toilet at the first opportunity, Gavin asks to be excused. He has to do this only when Aunt Myrtle and Uncle Vester are visiting. Before his mother can answer, Aunt Myrtle checks his plate. She squints at it for a few seconds as if trying to find a pea. "You may go," she finally says. He stands, quickly shoves his balled-up napkin into his pocket, and practically backs out of the room. He's free. However, before he can completely escape the dining room, Aunt Myrtle gets in. Gavin here is going to make a good dog walker while Vester is at his harmonizers convention. I know he and Carlotta are going to get along just fine. Gavin manages to smile weakly. He thinks of Carlotta's face, the round black button nose, the ugly cotton candy orange feathery fur with bits of black and white, those short little legs and sharp toenails that make clicking noises on the hard floors. He thinks of Carlotta's mouth, always fixed in something between a grin and a leer while she pants her stinky breath and shows off her pointed razor-sharp canines as if she'd love to sink them into Gavin's leg. Her liquidy eyes are always bright and menacing. A week with Carlotta. How will he ever be able to stand it? End of chapter 2.